So recently I heard about this documentary called Unknown Number, The High School Catfish, and I had to watch it because the entire premise is that this group of high schoolers in Michigan are cyberbullied and harassed for years by an unknown number, and it turns out to be one of their moms sending those messages. I wanted to look at the fascinating psychology of a mom who would do this to her own daughter, send thousands of texts threatening her, telling her to herself, that she's ugly, that she can't please her boyfriend, that her boyfriend is cheating on her. What would cause such a mom to do such a thing? I'm going to take you through what I found to be the most noteworthy psychologically from the documentary, the theories I had going along through it, and what turned out to be corroborated. And why ultimately I'm really concerned that the girl in question still wants a relationship with her mom, because based on the documentary alone, I'm not so convinced that her mom has changed. In 2020, Lauryn was a high schooler in a small town in Michigan. She was in a happy relationship with Owen, her classmate and longtime friend. Both her and Owen seemed really sweet to me, just like really unproblematic teenagers in love. When one day some hateful text started to come through, saying, "It's obvious Owen wants me and he's gonna break up with you." For a while the messages stopped, but 11 months later they returned. Again asking Lauryn, "Are you preparing for the end of the golden relationship? He will be with me while your lonely, ugly ass is alone." A lot of calling Lauryn ugly, effing trash bitch, don't effing wear leggings, ain't no one want to see your anorexic flat ass, you are worthless and mean nothing. They also started to get very graphic and sexual, suggesting that Lauryn couldn't please Owen, and some of the texts were also sent to Owen as well, sometimes 30 to 50 a day. So eventually they started to actually erode Lauryn's trust in her boyfriend. They started fighting a lot, and ultimately Owen suggested, "Listen, what if we break up for a while? Maybe we can get back together at some point, but maybe this will make the text stop." But they didn't. They just started escalating. Kill yourself, bitch. And they even started to get threatening. "I want to smash your head into a wall, finish yourself or I will." To the point where everyone who was investigating started wondering if Lauryn might actually hurt herself. After her breakup from Owen, they started to target Lauryn's performance in volleyball games. And the text started to get pinned on her classmate Chloe, who was also in volleyball and who had a history of animosity with Lauryn and also used to like Owen. As a result of this, Chloe lost a lot of friends and she didn't understand why for years no one would believe her that she didn't do it. Then the text also started to get pinned on Owen's cousin Adriana, who was a quiet kid who also started going through a lot of her own mental health issues as a result of the accusations, and she was interrogated by the police so much that she actually started to fear police officers every time she would see one. And then Owen started dating a new girl, and she started to receive some texts as well. At this point, the parents were just beyond themselves what to do about it, so the police had to ask the FBI to intervene. And the FBI was able to link an IP address to Lauryn's mom, Kendra. At first, nobody believed it. She seemed like such a caring mom to everyone. She was really good friends with Owen's mom. She was hiding in plain sight. She was actually in the documentary. And so up until this point, she was also being interviewed just like all the other parents. And I did notice that she had sort of insecure body language, like hunched over shoulders, just seemed not really confident in herself. When the police came to arrest her, she was very much hugging her daughter, holding her hand, trying to sort of soothe her. And her daughter seemed to really need her mom's comfort in that moment and accepted her mom's affection. It also turned out that she'd been lying to her husband about being employed for over a year. And Lauryn described how when she found out, she felt at first shock, then sad, then mad, and then what she described as crazy. Kendra was sentenced to prison for 19 months, during which time Lauryn continued to stay in contact with her. And in 2024, Kendra was released. It seems like Lauryn's dad is not letting them meet, but Lauryn is very much interested in reconnecting with her mom. So let me tell you my theories while I was watching the documentary and then my theories afterwards. Obviously, most of us will never know what it's like to be cyberbullied by our own mom, but there are lots of other cybersecurity threats out there. For example, just a few weeks ago, millions of people were exposed when they received a phishing email from what looked like Instagram. Luckily for me, I never check my email, but 17.5 million people's data might have been exposed as a result of it. It's really important to practice online safety, and a really easy way to do that is by using a VPN. And that's where today's sponsor comes in NordVPN. NordVPN is the fastest VPN on the planet. It provides greater internet security with just one click. Their pro threat detection helps you stay safe from phishing, scams, identity theft. So phishing is when a scammer tries to impersonate somebody else who you trust, like your bank or Instagram, for example, basically to trick you into giving them some sort of information. And pro threat detection detects up to 85% of phishing attempts. It automatically scans all websites and automatically blocks harmful ones. NordVPN also has highly secure encryption, 24/7 customer support, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, with one account, you can cover up to 10 devices. Get an exclusive NordVPN offer and 4 extra months at my link, nordvpn.com/ANA. Use the code ANA, that's ANA. One thing that I was wondering about as I was watching the documentary was, does Lauryn's mom maybe feel jealous of her happy relationship with Owen because maybe she has her own issues in her marriage? This isn't ever really addressed directly in the documentary. We don't learn too much about the relationship between Lauryn's parents, but obviously Kendra was hiding a lot. She was lying about a lot, kind of leading a double life from her husband, and so that definitely points to some lack of trust between them, but we don't know more than that. One thing that I didn't consider was that Kendra might actually be jealous of Lauryn because she was pining after Owen herself. This didn't cross my mind because it's fucking sick, to be honest, but Owen and his mom certainly seemed to think that that's what was going on. Owen described how Kendra was just too friendly to him. She would cut his steak for him. She would show up to his games even after he and Lauryn broke up. She would text him out of the blue. Another question that I had while watching the documentary was Kendra bullied in high school? And maybe she's resentful of her daughter's seemingly happy high school experiences that everyone was described as being, kind of close and friendly with each other. This was not corroborated in the documentary, so I honestly don't know if it's true or not. Another thing that I theorized was that Kendra probably has some early trauma, and that was in fact corroborated. One of the notes that I took while watching the documentary was she mistreated? Because we tend to think about like victim and bully as separate opposite categories, but that is very much a false dichotomy, because somebody could be a victim in one way and then go on to be a bully in a different situation. And the victim to bully pipeline is actually a lot more frequent than you would think it is. And in fact, I would argue that a lot of bullies, if not most bullies and abusers, do the things that they do in large part because they were at some point victimized themselves. And so when we talk about somebody who has a history of being victimized but is the perpetrator in a specific situation, and they bring up their victim origin story as a way to excuse their behavior, those two really need to be addressed separately. Like, you could be a victim in this situation and the perpetrator of that situation needs to be held accountable, but if you are now perpetrating some sort of abuse against a different person in this situation, then that is a separate issue that needs to be addressed and you need to be held accountable for that. I bring this up because Kendra spoke in the documentary about how she was essayed at age 17. And by the way, you guys, I know it is annoying to need to tiptoe around these phrases. I promise you I hate it even more than you do, but unfortunately if you say certain words, the algorithm pings you, your video gets demonetized, it doesn't get shown to anyone, so believe me, I find it even more annoying than you do. Anyway, Kendra said that motherhood sort of made her trauma resurface, especially as Lauryn was starting to inch towards that age 17 when Kendra experienced her trauma. And again, this can definitely happen. I know as a mother myself, when you are raising a child, the life stage that they're at sort of brings up memories and reflections on what happened during your own life at that point in your development. So I don't disbelieve her at all. I just, again, think that is a separate issue that should not be used as an excuse for her behavior. Another theory that I had while watching the documentary was, does Kendra have her own body image issues? Maybe she feels fat herself, and that's why she's sort of bullying her daughter for being too thin and being anorexic. And the mom did later admit to this. She said she, at the time, was too thin and she was not eating, and she sort of projected that onto her daughter. Now, I don't know if maybe she wasn't eating because of stress, or maybe she wasn't eating because she felt fat. When somebody shames another person for being too skinny, it can sort of go either way. It could either be because they feel they're too skinny themselves, or because they feel that they're too fat themselves. So, I'm not sure, but either way, it definitely seemed to be true that she had body image issues of herself that she was making her daughter's problem. So those are my theories watching the documentary before we found out in the documentary who was the perpetrator, but I already knew because I'd heard the story from from somewhere else. But let's go a little bit deeper than that. Why would somebody do this to their own daughter? Let's talk about projection. So projection is when I feel some type of way about myself, and instead of looking that in the face, I accuse you of holding whatever traits I don't like about myself. So it definitely seems like Kendra experienced some of that, but also something else called projective identification, which is when you make somebody else feel the way that you actually feel. So if she unconsciously believes that she was to blame for her previous SA, it makes sense why she would then slut shame her own daughter. If she was reacting to her own SA through hypersexuality in some sort of way, then it makes sense to accuse her daughter of hypersexuality. Yet somehow she was also shaming her for not being promiscuous enough. It also on some level doesn't make sense. If she felt worthless, that projective identification then makes her want to make her daughter feel worthless instead. If she was insecure of her body image, she then makes her daughter insecure of her body image. When someone can't hold their painful feelings and they hold certain manipulative traits, they might try to just offload their feelings onto somebody else, usually somebody close to them, and usually someone with less power, because that target feels safer. And also it helps them feel understood, because it's like, okay, now I'm not the only person feeling this way. Now I've also made this person feel the way that I feel, and it feels kind of good to watch that reflected at me. And also because particularly in certain parent-child dynamics, if there's enmeshment, the parent doesn't really see the child as a separate person. They see them as an extension of them. And so in a sense, it almost feels like a safer way to let yourself experience those feelings, because you're letting this extension of you experience the feelings for you. You're letting a part of you experience it, but not the core you. And so I also think on some unconscious level, if you feel that way, if you don't see your daughter as a separate person, do you really see it as a crime? Or do you sort of see it as hurting yourself? I want you guys to remember that anytime somebody is hateful or bullying someone or cyber stalking them, that is a deeply unhappy person deep down. Whatever they are saying to their victim is usually how they feel about themselves. And again, that is no excuse for us to pity them. Plenty of people hate themselves and actually don't make it everybody else's suffering. But it can be empowering to remember that if you're on the receiving end of it, because it's like, even if this person never sees justice for what they've done, you already know that they're living in their own personal hell. What they're saying to you is a fraction of what they're saying to themselves. I also wonder if maybe there is a part of Kendra that genuinely does want her own daughter dead, because in her explanation, she described these immense feelings of love that she has for her daughter. People are multitudes. There can be a part of you that adores your child and idealizes them, and a part of you that wants them gone. And unfortunately, I think we see no shortage of examples from this in current times. Parents who openly admit to feeling contempt for their child, for not liking them, for regretting having them, for feeling like their life or body or relationship or whatever it was ruined by their child. It doesn't usually go as far as them texting their child telling them to off themselves, but believe me, the children still pick up on that sort of contempt. I also wondered if Kendra was maybe displacing anger over how other aspects of her life were going onto her daughter. We know her career wasn't going well. She was pretending to be employed at one place, lying about quitting her former job when in reality she was fired. Again, I have to wonder if there were issues in her marriage as well, because people who have a happy relationship and a supportive partner don't typically resort to behaviors like this. But if it wasn't acceptable for her to act out that anger in other situations, like at work, like with her husband, then she might have displaced those feelings of anger towards someone more vulnerable in the dark, where she thought she could get away with it. And something that the documentary talked about that I also jotted down when I was watching the documentary was that this idea of like cyberbullying your daughter and then swooping in to comfort her can be a way of like encouraging codependency. You're creating a fictitious villain so that you can run in and be the hero. Somebody in the documentary called it a case of cyber Munchausen's. It's much easier to keep someone close when you destroy their self-esteem. That's the entire preface of abusive dynamics. It's no one's going to love you like I love you. You're worthless. You do everything wrong. You are all bad. If the victim believes that, then they become increasingly dependent on the abuser. Now, I noticed that when the police confronted her and they tried separating Kendra and her daughter, Kendra said, "I need to stay with her." And I was wondering why. Because on the surface, it might have looked like, oh, she wants to comfort her daughter. But I also wondered if it was maybe to appease her guilt about what had just come out, or to make sure that her daughter doesn't have the space to sort of process her feelings of anger, or to manipulate her into continued dependence. Apparently, this codependency is still going on to this day, because people people in the documentary talked about how it's very difficult to put distance between Lauryn and Kendra, even while Kendra was locked up. Lauryn herself said, "Not having the relationship with my mom, I just don't feel like myself." That is the textbook definition of codependency, not "I need other people," like the internet likes to make it sound. No, it's completely normal to need other people, to depend on other people. What makes it codependency is if you feel like you don't know who you are without that person. You cease to exist without that person. And I gotta say, I'm not convinced that Kendra learned her lesson or changed as a result of this. Because she says something along the lines of, we've all done illegal stuff but haven't been caught, and that people judge her just because they don't know the real story. Which to me kind of sounds like blame shifting. It's like, yeah, well, I've done stuff, but you've done stuff too. And also false equivalence. Because no, Kendra, taking an illegal substance or illegally trespassing as a teen, having fun with your friends, even the example she gave of driving under the influence, which I actually do think is more serious, are not the same thing as sending your own daughter death threats for years on end. That's very much a false equivalence. Like, these are not on the same level. Yes, of course, we are all imperfect humans. We have all done terrible things at one point or another, but there's a point at which, the terrible thing that you've done crosses into something inexcusable. And to me, that line has been crossed. People in the documentary talked about how they suspect Kendra is still lying about how she didn't start the text. She just kind of started sending her daughter these texts as a way to find out who was originally harassing her, and then it just kind of snowballed into something she couldn't control. Law enforcement said that they have basically no evidence that anyone other than her started the text messages. And so if she's still lying, if she's still not being honest, then that also suggests she might not have actually changed. And there's just a lot of language that sort of distanced herself from what she did and made it seem almost like an external force that took over her actions rather than things she did. She said it snowballed and she didn't know how to stop. It's not who I was and it's not who I am today. Well, Kendra, I don't know that I really believe a demon entered your body and took over your willpower, so actually it was you. It was a part of you on some level. She also was deflecting responsibility when she said, I was someone different in those moments. She was making excuses when she said, I was in a bad place, and blaming her own teenage trauma. But most notably, I was really disturbed by a message they showed, which seemed to be a communication between her and her daughter when she was in prison. I'm mad at you. You made me sad. You only said bye. You didn't say I love you. I forgive you. XOXO, I love you. And then some stupid shit about mixing together two words. Let's break down this message. I'm mad at you. You make me sad. This is textbook emotional blackmail. This is the guilting component, making her daughter feel responsible for her own emotions, which is also emotional parentification. Parentification is when a parent puts a child in charge of what should be the parent's responsibility. Things like making sure that the bills are paid, making sure that they have groceries. Emotional parentification is when a parent makes the child responsible for the emotional welfare of the household. Immediately followed by, I forgive you, smiley face. So she's guilting her daughter, and then she goes into framing herself as forgiving for her daughter's crime and good and this loving parent. The exact same pattern as before. Make her daughter feel bad and make her responsible for alleviating her own emotional suffering, and then act like the hero for the way that she's responding to her daughter's alleged crimes. And that stupid shit about mixing two words just seems so infantile to me. It just really reminded me of like when someone's trying too hard to be friendly because deep down they're like holding in resentments, or they're like trying to seem buddy-buddy to overcompensate for like deep issues in the relationship that aren't going addressed. I really hope that Lauryn finds the strength to walk away from her mother. I rarely give advice on this channel. Like, I do not typically tell people what I think they should do with their lives, because it is their life and their choice to make and their choice to take responsibility for. But in this specific situation, I really fear for Lauryn if she isn't able to cut off her mother and find other sources of comfort for the trauma that she's endured. Like, I really, really do worry about that. Please let me know what you thought about this. Like, this documentary is kind of a well-kept secret. So I'm kind of looking for any input on this possible, because it's just kind of crazy to me that more people aren't talking about this. But anyway, thank you for your time today. I hope you have a nice rest of your week, and take care.
Tell me what you need.